Welcome to episode 52 of the Tax Professionals podcast. In this episode, I share with you the one thing to help you get exactly what you want out of your tax career sooner rather than later.
Welcome to the Tax Professionals podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your tax career. Here's your host, Jack Bonehill.
It's April 2021 and I'm on holiday. I'm just about to sit down in our wooden lodging centre parks to start a new book, even though my fiancée would rather me be in the hot tub. This book makes a big claim: achieve more in less time. This is right up my street, and it annoyed me earlier in my career when I was told to work more hours because my objective has always been to work effectively in the time I have, not to work more. So I'm looking forward to reading this book. As I'm reading it, I can see that the claim starts to get bigger. It claims the key to achieving more in less time is to focus on one thing at a time, and one thing only. Now, I'm thinking this is another one of those books that overclaims and underdelivers. I'm sceptical. But based on the teachings of the book, I set myself one very optimistic goal: to become senior manager 18 months after becoming manager, whilst only working my core hours. And I set out to achieve this by using what the book says. I told my boss what I wanted, and they told me they'd need to run it past the partners to see if it's possible. I'm in my home office, and my boss calls me up on Teams about 4 months before my goals deadline, and they tell me they've spoken to the partners. They're now going to tell me my goal isn't possible. I'll be gutted. I'll be disappointed, but I'll understand. What she says next makes me realise the power of the book's teachings, as she asks me if I want to be senior manager basically with immediate effect, 4 months before my very optimistic goal. Because this one thing approach has been so effective for me, I want to show you how you can use the principles from the book to do the same for you. I tell you about the 7 lies that derail us, what the book calls the truth to achieving more in less time. I'll give you some tips to help you to implement the principles from the book, and I'll tell you about how I've personally applied the one thing at work, particularly in relation to the goal that I just told you about. Rough timings for each of these sections can be found in the detail section of this episode within your podcast player, or by heading on over to the show notes for this episode at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP52. The next episode of the podcast is all about working in-house with Stephen Hodgson, who's head of indirect tax at a huge gambling business called Entain. They basically own loads of the big gambling brands. The episode will be out on Monday the 18th of July. And in line with this episode, do this one thing to make sure that you don't miss out on this episode or any future episodes of the podcast. Sign up for email notifications by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/subscribe. The emails will give you a brief summary of each episode, which are bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. When I graduated, my first job choice was to be an actuary, with working in tax as a close second. And even though I've enjoyed all my tax roles, it wasn't until I became CTA qualified that I decided tax was where I wanted to stay. With tax, there's so many different roles and places to work. They all provide something a bit different, and while that's great, it's meant I've spent a lot of time thinking about what areas of tax I want to work in and where I want to take my career long term. I've been caught up in my own thoughts. I've had doubts. I've been unsure. What's been most useful for me is talking to others, saying what I'm thinking, having someone listen, and hearing their advice. The tax recruitment company understands this and can help you with a free career coaching chat with them. They have over 6 years' experience in the sector. They can help you explore the options, they can help you decide what's best for you, and they can help you to create a plan to transform your tax career, making you feel more content and happier in your life. You can book a free, no obligation call with them by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/free career chat. That's thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/free career chat. Thanks to the tax recruitment company for sponsoring the podcast, which is helping me to continue creating episodes. Without further ado, let's get to the episode. The 6 lies that mislead and derail us. So I realised I said 7 in the introduction, so apologies for that, it's actually 6. So I'll quickly talk about the 6 lies that the book says mislead and derail us, and I'll go into a little bit more detail into each one. So the 6 lies are that everything matters equally, multitasking, disciplines life, willpower is always on will call, a balanced life, and big is bad. So, everything matters equally. I think this one's pretty obvious. It says that it's a complete lie that basically things have equal priority and importance, and that really at any one given time there's only one thing that matters the most to you and will help you achieve, I suppose, your goals. So it makes you think about if you could only do one thing with your time, like the next thing that you do, if you're going to do one thing out of everything else, what would you actually do? What would it be? It talks about this thing called Pareto's principle, which I've heard about quite a few times. Basically, the principle is that out of 20% of your effort, you get 80% of your results. So rather than trying to do everything, it says that if you focus on the 20% tasks that are going to get you 80% of results, that's a really, really good way to be effective and achieve a lot more out of your time. Multitasking. I found this one quite interesting because loads of people multitask all the time in terms of they're writing a report, but also responding to Teams messages or responding to emails, and they're trying to do all these things at once. And it tells you how bad multitasking actually is, because supposedly scientifically we can't ever really concentrate on two tasks properly at once. It's more like task switching. So for 1 second you're thinking about one, and then the next second you're thinking about the other. But actually, in between switching to different tasks, your brain actually takes like a few seconds to like flick back over. So every time you swap between tasks, you're actually wasting time. Distractions are basically therefore bad because it takes you time to get back in the zone after you've been distracted. Trying to do multiple things at once is bad because you're just constantly swapping it, and so basically it will dilute what you're doing. You won't do as good job of it, and it will take you longer because your focus isn't on one thing. So that's multitasking, the lie of multitasking. A disciplined life. So this one, for me at least, was a bit insightful because it kind of says that the key to being successful isn't being disciplined. It's actually about building habits that make you seem disciplined. And it basically says that if you've mastered a habit, it becomes so easy for you to do, so second nature, that you don't even have to think about it. So that uses less of your energy, focus, and it doesn't take as much motivation to do something if it's a habit, because you'll just do it automatically. And I applied this for something at home. My now wife was basically always moaning at me for draping the shower towel over the full radiator, like the hand towel radiator that we have in the bathroom, because she said it just looks a mess basically. And I agreed it did look a mess, but I had my reasons for doing it because I thought it dried the towel quicker. But anyway, I said I will basically stop draping it over the radiator and fold it up and put it on nicely every single time. And so I did that probably for about 2 months, where it was effort every single day to do it. I had to think about it, like, I need to fold up this towel. Whereas now, about a year later, I honestly just do it. Don't think about it. It takes less than a second. So I've taught myself this habit. It takes no effort or energy to do now. It's just automatic. So I completely agree with this lie. Disciplined life, it's not about being disciplined. It's about having habits that make you seem disciplined. So build one habit at a time, make that one stick, and then focus on the next one. The lie of willpower is always on will call. So this wording for me is a bit confusing. I don't think it makes the most sense, but essentially what it's trying to say is you can't just call upon motivation at the time that you want it. It's more about saying that there's certain times in the day where you personally are going to have the most motivation, are going to be able to do certain tasks better than at other times in the day, and it's about taking advantage of that. And this is where kind of building those habits is good, because if it's a habit, you need less motivation, so you need to use less willpower to basically do things. So the next lie is a balanced life. It says that a balanced life is actually a lie. It's impossible to achieve balance all the time, but instead it's about counterbalance. So this didn't make the most sense to me at the time when I was reading it, but I've literally just come back from a 2-week holiday. The week that I've just worked has been the first week back, and I've just felt so refreshed, so motivated, and I've done a lot more work than what I probably would have done in the week just before I went off for 2 weeks. And when I was thinking about that, I thought, well, I basically counterbalanced all that work that I've done before holiday by having 2 weeks of rest. So now I'm feeling more in balance again because I've counterbalanced it. And the last lie is that big is bad. So it kind of says that a lot of people think aiming for a really big or potentially scary goal is a bad thing because it does exactly that. It scares you. It can make you feel stressed, etc. But what it says in this book is aiming for a big goal is not the bad thing. The bad thing is how we go about trying to achieve that big goal by always doing big things. And instead it says the thing to do is focus on one small task at a time that is taking you towards that big goal. So big in their eyes is not bad when you're talking about the goal, the overall goal that you're setting. But that big is bad when you're going about achieving that goal. You should go small instead. So they're the 6 lies. The truth then, the simple path to productivity and achieving what you want. So the main part of this section of the book is about what they call the focusing question. So the focusing question is, what's the one thing that I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? So I'll say that to you again. What's the one thing that I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? You might be thinking, well, it's just a question. How useful can that question be in reality? Because that's exactly how I felt at the time. But let's say that you've got lots of things that you want to achieve in your life, lots of different goals. Is there one goal that you can achieve that if you've achieved that goal, it will make achieving all your other goals easier or unnecessary? So that's kind of from the big picture perspective. And then when you go down into the smaller tasks, like what do I need to do? What's the small thing for me to do that's going to take me towards my goal? So let's say your goal was to work 4 days a week. You might decide that the one thing that you can do, so that by doing it, it makes everything else easier or unnecessary in terms of achieving that goal. The one thing could be that you go and speak to your boss or HR and tell them that's what you want and that you want it by a certain date. And then once you've done that, you will then think, okay, well now I've told them, what's the next one thing that I can do so that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary in terms of achieving that goal of working 4 days a week. And you can kind of see how you can keep using it and keep using it and keep using it. And what it does, from my experience now, is it really focuses you to spend your time on things that are actually moving you towards your goal rather than just doing lots of things that aren't really relevant or helping you to get towards that goal. I did take this question quite literally initially, like surely there's not one single thing that you can do that's basically better than every single else, and how on earth am I going to figure that out? But I kind of took a step back of it and just thought that's not really what this whole question is trying to get at. It's trying to help you just think of what's one really kind of impactful thing that you can do that is going to be much more impactful than everything else that you're doing to help you get towards your goal. It's about focusing on those 20% things that are going to get you 80% of your results, the Pareto's principle I talked about a little bit earlier in the episode. So the book kind of gives this pie chart to kind of help you think about how you should be setting goals so that they're the most effective and in line with that focusing question. It's basically a pie chart with 4 quadrants. So imagine this. The first quadrant, top right, says big and specific. So the goal is big and specific. The second quadrant, moving over to the left, the top left, is big and broad. The one beneath that, so bottom left, is small and broad. And the one on bottom right is small and specific. So the example they give in the book is about someone that's a salesperson, like what type of goals could they set if they were putting them within each of those quadrants? So these are the ones that they put down. So the big and specific, the top right quadrant, is what can I do to double sales in 6 months? It's clearly a big goal and it's clearly specific. If you go to the big and broad, they've got what can I do to double sales? It's a big goal, but it's not as specific as the last one because it doesn't say by when. Is it going to be within 2 years, 10 years, 20 years? It's not specific whilst it is a big goal. The small and broad quadrant, the bottom left, it says, what can I do to increase sales? It's broad, it doesn't say by when are they going to increase sales. It's also small because it doesn't say by how much. It doesn't quantify how much the sales are going to increase by. And then the last one is small and specific. What can I do to increase sales by 5% this year? So compared to the big one, the big and specific one, what can I do to double sales in 6 months? You can see how that's, well, I suppose just completely different in terms of the one being big and specific and the other one being small and specific. Now, I remember reading this and feeling stressed at the time, thinking, well, if I just double everything all the time, that's a really big and difficult task to achieve. But really that's the point the book's trying to get across. And it does say, if you aim big and specific, but don't achieve that big and specific, you're still going to achieve more than what you would have done if you went small and specific, because you're trying to hit a bigger goal. You're going to think in a more creative way. You're going to try and go about it in a much better way, which, to be honest, I do agree with, but it doesn't stop me feeling stressed at the thought of doubling everything. So once that big and specific goal is created, what can I do to double sales in 6 months? You can then use the focusing question, what's the one thing that I can do such that by doing it everything else becomes easier or unnecessary, to figure out what the next small step is to basically achieve that goal. Now, in that case, it could be to get a sales coach. It could be to research ways to bring in a lot more customers in the specific industry that you work in. It could be to have a look at what other companies are doing that are making great increases in their sales each year. Then once you've done that, you can keep asking yourself that same question again to figure out the next step, the next step, the next step, until you get towards and hopefully achieve, or at least come close to achieving, your goal. I'll talk a little bit later in the next section about what's called goal setting to the now. So that kind of bridges the gap a bit more, so you can help see a bit more clearly how you would go all the way from where you are now to your end goal by breaking it down into like baby steps almost. Extraordinary results and unlocking the possibilities within you. That's the name of the third section of the book. And it's more so about achieving extraordinary results in terms of what you want out of life, not what someone else wants. So it's not all about like being a tax partner or earning lots of money. It's about getting what you want, achieving extraordinary results for what you want. I want you to imagine a triangle where the bottom layer of the triangle says purpose, your purpose. Just above that, it says priority. And then above that, right at the top of the triangle, it says productivity. So the reason for this kind of image and triangle is to say that basically, in order for you to be acting productive, you need to be acting in accordance with your priorities. And your priorities are driven by your purpose and goals. So you first off need the bottom of the triangle, you need a purpose, or you need a goal. You can then prioritise by doing things that are the most important. You can then prioritise by doing things that work you towards that goal or purpose. And then if you do that, then you're being productive. It's not about doing loads of things like banging out loads of tax reports or tax returns. It's about doing things that are actually taking you towards your goal. Now, let's say that you want to be a tax writer, and you want to write a tax book, then just submitting tax returns might be seen as productive in the work environment because you're doing lots of tax returns. In terms of for you personally, it's not productive because it's not getting you any closer towards your goal of writing a tax book. So if you did want to be productive, you'd need to be acting upon priorities that are helping you to write that tax book, whether it's learning how to tax write better, whether it's doing articles for magazines, whether it's talking to a publisher. Doing all those things would be seen as productive in achieving that goal that you want, whereas doing the tax returns wouldn't. Hopefully that makes sense anyway. It's just a little bit of an example I'm trying to give to exemplify that a little bit. So it kind of demyths, I suppose, or tries to debunk the myth that being productive is about doing lots of things. Whereas this book says that it's not about doing lots of things, it's about doing things that are in line with, I suppose, your goals, your objectives, what you want to achieve for you. This whole concept of purpose I find a difficult one. Maybe that's because I'm not completely clear on what my own purpose is, but I did have a go at the time when I first read this book at writing down what my purpose was. And I broke it down into kind of two areas there, I suppose. I broke it down into my work purpose and my podcast purpose. My work purpose that I wrote down at the time was to help businesses be smart in relation to their employment taxes. And my podcast one was to help tax professionals discover and achieve what they want out of their tax careers. I suppose the problem I had with that is I had two purposes and I really wanted one. So a little bit more recently, I spent a bit of time thinking about this again and I've come up with this instead. So the purpose that I've wrote down and kind of agreed on now, for me at least, is to become the best tax professional that I can become so that I can help others to do the same. And that for me feels better as of right now. It might change again in a few months' time or a few years, wherever it might be. But I can recommend that you spend some time thinking about what you think your purpose might be and then kind of applying the principles of that triangle that I just talked about. So you can have your purpose and you can choose yourself a big goal that's in line with that purpose by using the focus in question. You can then be acting productive in relation to achieving that goal, which is in line with your purpose, by doing things, by working on the priorities that will help you get towards it. So you already know what my big goal was, because I told you at the start of the episode about wanting to become senior manager basically within 18 months of becoming manager whilst only working my core hours. I'll talk to you a little bit after what kind of goals and priorities I set myself in order to try and achieve that. So, goal setting to the now. So, I'll tell you about what it says in the book first, but rather than take it literally, I think it's better to take the principle away from this, because that's what I've done more than take it literally. But it says, start with a big and specific someday goal. What's the one thing that you want to do someday that basically will make everything else in your life easier or necessary in terms of obviously what you want to achieve out of your life? Then, based on that someday goal, what's the one thing that I can do in the next 5 years that makes achieving that someday goal easier or unnecessary? Based on your 5-year goal, what's the one thing that you can do this year? It's just that by doing it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary in terms of achieving your 5-year goal. Break it down into your monthly, break it down into your weekly, break it down into your daily, break that into your right now goal. What can you do right now? So obviously once you know what you should be doing or what you could do to be working towards your goal, now obviously you need time to do it. And how do you get that when you're so busy at work and basically you only have time to do all those tax returns because by the time you've done them, no time's left? Well, this is where time blocking comes in. So I tried time blocking in the past in terms of like putting something in my calendar and say like, this is what I'm going to be doing this time, this is what I'm going to be doing at this time. And I did that and filled up my calendar for the full day. And I found out very quickly that that just didn't work for me because it's impossible to predict how long it's going to take you to do something. So then you have to keep moving around your calendar all the time. And it just became highly chaotic. It wasn't for me at all. But I thought I would give it a go in terms of just time blocking time to work on the priorities for achieving my goal. But what the book says to do is, first off, block time off. Use time blocking to block your time off so that basically you have time to rejuvenate, that you have time and energy to give your all, I suppose, to your priorities and the time that you do spend working. Then time block time to work on your goals, basically. And then also time block time so that you can decide and figure out what things you should be doing each week, each month, etc., to work towards your goal. So it's a bit like planning ahead, I suppose, in a way, and then doing everything you can to make sure that you actually commit to that time block and actually do what you said you were going to do at that time and not get distracted or someone else to come in and ask you to do something and then you drop it. Protecting that time to spend on those important things. Remember, that's what this is all about. It's about putting time aside to work on things that are important to you to help you achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Just a reminder that you can book a free career coaching chat with the Tax Recruitment Company by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/free career chat. The Tax Recruitment Company can help you decide what's best for you and your career. So I just want to spend a bit of time there talking about how I've applied the one thing in practice to give you some idea on how you can do the same thing as well. You might even find the way that I do it works for you too. If so, great. But if not, hopefully it gives you some ideas. So I want to start with this big goal, I suppose, the one that I set of becoming senior manager within 18 months of becoming manager by working only my core hours. I thought about what I wanted someday, I suppose, in some respects, because I didn't want to be working super long hours, but I still wanted to have a successful career and enjoy the time that I do spend working. I don't want to not enjoy the work I do, but equally I don't want to have work as the only thing I do. So I thought maybe I think I used the someday goal of becoming tax partner at some point by only working core hours. I think that was my someday goal. I thought, well, okay, what's kind of the next immediate thing then that I can do that's going to get me on track for being a tax partner by working only core hours? And I thought for me, it was the senior manager goal that we just talked about. So I time blocked some time out in my calendar every single Friday at the end of the day to think about what do I need to do at work in the next week to make sure that basically I'm on track for becoming senior manager by April 2022. So I had that overriding goal, had a deadline on it, I knew when I wanted to achieve it by. So within my weekly planning sessions each week, the ones that were just before the next month began, I thought, like, what are the things that I want to achieve? What are the goals I need to achieve in this next month to keep me on track for becoming senior manager by April 2022, only working core hours? And these are some of the goals that I came up to. I can't remember them like completely specifically because unfortunately I don't have a record of them. I deleted them once I achieved them. But some of my monthly goals were that I wanted to create a work scheduling system so that we could basically know what capacity we had within the team within any given week or month, so that we didn't overpromise to clients, which would result in us having to just work more hours over our core hours to deliver. And for me, that was a really big one, because if I'm working and the team are working way over their core hours now, then even if I did become senior manager by April, it wouldn't be with working only my core hours. So I thought, first off, I need to do that. One of my other ones was to spend, I think it was about 5 hours a week training and developing staff in the team. And the reason I thought that was a good one is because if they were more competent and skilled and enjoying their work, they would want to stay working within the team, and that they would be able to get more done with their time, which again means that hopefully people need to work less because they're getting more done within the time that they have. From my perspective, if they were producing better work, that would mean I would need to spend less time reviewing it, which means that I need to spend less time on some things. So you can kind of see again how it's all coming into the core hours thing, making sure that I'm not working more than that, trying to achieve that, but also doing things that are still, I suppose, good for the team, because I'm trying to make the team more valuable, I suppose, in that respect. And if the team's more valuable, then we're delivering high quality work to clients, we will earn more money. So you can kind of see how by doing some of these things, it makes everything else easier or unnecessary. One of my other monthly goals was to get better at delegation. So that one is a bit more high level, but I just had a few disasters, I suppose, with delegation where I'd ask someone to do something, and because I hadn't delegated it properly, it took me forever to basically change it and get what I needed out of the work, almost starting from scratch. So I thought, what a waste of time. Wasting time within the team, that's not good. So that was one of the other things I worked on. So then once I had like my monthly goals, which I was doing in my weekly planning sessions at the end of the month, each week I would then reflect on those monthly goals and think, what do I need to do this week to basically be on track for achieving that monthly goal? And I would then block out a certain amount of time within the week that I could spend working on the tasks and the activities that I need to do towards those goals. Again, always asking that question, what's the one thing that I can do so that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or necessary in terms of achieving that goal. I just wanted to give you a few quick examples of potential big and specific goals for you outside of, I suppose, just becoming promoted or becoming a partner, because they're the obvious ones that people want. So one of your goals could be to work part-time but also become a director by a specific point in time. You could want to be working in an in-house role by a certain point in time, or I alluded to this one throughout the episode, you could want to write a tax book, say by 2025, on a certain topic or on a certain area of tax. So these are all potential big goals and specific goals for you, as long as they're in line with what you want out of your working life. So in summary then, for this episode, there are the 7 lies that mislead and derail us. These are: everything matters equally, multitasking, a disciplined life, willpower is always on will core, a balanced life, big is bad. The focusing question, what's the one thing that I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary, helps you to focus on the most important tasks to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Extraordinary results are achieved by adding in priority to your goals, your purpose, your priority, and then productivity, remembering the triangle that was talked about earlier in the episode. The way you can then work productively is to goal set to the now. Start with your big goal and then keep breaking it down into periods of time that are closer until you get to the present time, and then block time out in your calendar so that you can work on the actions that you need to do to get towards those goals. And each week, spend some time planning so that you can think about the goals that you want to achieve and what you need to do in the month or week or whatever timescales you decide to go with. So then you can make sure that each week you're spending time on working towards the goals that you set for yourself and that you want to achieve. Thanks for listening to this episode. I know it's a bit longer than the usual solo episodes, but the principles I learned from this book have been so revolutionary for me that I just wanted to spend enough time to get the key points across to you as well, so that you can have, I suppose, the same results as what I've had by applying them. The show notes for this episode can be accessed at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP52, and TTPP52 just stands for the Tax Professionals Podcast, episode 52. The next episode of the podcast is all about working in-house with Stephen Hodson, who's head of indirect tax at a huge gambling business called Entain. They own loads of big gambling brands, and this episode is out on Monday, the 18th of July. In line with this episode, do this one thing to make sure that you don't miss out on this episode or any future episodes of the podcast. Sign up for email notifications by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/subscribe. The emails will give you a brief summary of each episode, which are released bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. But that's it for this episode. I hope you liked the episode and have taken away some useful points to help you to progress, develop, and improve your tax career. Until next time.